and lower basin states, and more specifically the Arizona DCP agreements, we are now operating under the first year in DCP. This will provide an overview of how CAP is making the necessary DCP contributions for Arizona, the implications to CAP operations, and the outlook for the coming years. Now, our speaker today is going to be Deanna Ikeya, or I mean, sorry, I did do that wrong, didn't I?
Oh, that was great.
She sent me an email. And I focused on the last part. Ikeya?
Ikeya, you got it.
All right. And she is a senior water policy analyst at the Central Arizona Project, focused on implementing policies and programs to protect and enhance CAP's Colorado River water supply. Her efforts include basin-wide conservation and demand management programs, implementation of DCP within Arizona, water supply projections and shortage impact analysis, and development and implementation of CAP's intentionally created surplus program. Deanna's career spans more than 20 years in water services. She previously worked for the Arizona Department of Water Services and Arizona municipalities. Her work has included groundwater and river system modeling, water conservation, water resources and infrastructure planning, and Colorado River water policy projects. She joined CAP in 2016. Deanna has a bachelor's degree in engineering from the Colorado School of Mines and a master's degree in civil engineering from ASU. Thank you so much, Deanna. I'm going to pass this off to you now.
Okay. I am waiting for the screen, I think, that says that I can share my screen.
That should be on there already, Deanna. You're not seeing it?
No. I saw the poll before, and now I'm not seeing anything else other than the blank connected GoToWebinar.
Okay, 1 second. I'm going to give it back to myself and give it back to you to see if that pings something.
Okay.
Everyone, thank you for bearing with us.
Yeah.
We did do a practice. Do you see it now, Deanna?
We did, and it went super easy before, and it's not doing that now.
Do you see it now?
I don't.
Okay.
Before, it came up with a little window right in the middle. It said, share your screen. What am I doing wrong?
If you want to go ahead and start talking, I'm going to you've sent it to me, so I'm going to pull it up on my end, and I can just advance the screens for you. So if you would like to just go ahead and introduce yourself a little more.
Okay. Well, we're just going to be impromptu here. And so thank you so much for hosting me and setting this up as a virtual event. I know you've done a lot of work to make this go fairly smoothly, as in asking for the slides ahead of time so that we could work through things like this. But Shayna and Jackie, thanks again for all your efforts on that. I know we've been, everyone's probably been through a lot of changes here in the last few weeks, right, as we get used to our new normal. But I would like to start by recognizing that probably everyone attending today is somehow tied to the water business. And I'm sure you must recognize how critical you all are and the jobs that you do, especially now. And we may not be right on the front lines like those in the healthcare field, or maybe as visible as those stocking the shelves and making deliveries, but the work that you all do, working in a field that makes sure that the supplies and infrastructure for water treatment and distribution and sewer collections and sewer treatment, that all of those services are available and working for everybody. And that is just, those are just such important jobs. And so I hope you recognize how important it is for all of you to stay healthy and safe. And I hope that that has been the case for all of you. So I guess with that, I'll pull up a chair, got a good lunch, and let's talk about something other than that for a few minutes. Let's talk about water.
Deanna, did it pop up now?
No, I'm sorry.
Nope.
Oh, here, wait, let's see. So it has the button
You're
that's saying
Yep.
stop sharing screen. So am I sharing my screen?
You are.
Okay, so here, let me pull up my presentation.
There you go. Sorry.
All right. Okay, thanks.
Guys, that was my end fully. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so there was my opening, and we're gonna start with a celebration. This week is a major anniversary for CAP. Almost to the day, 35 years ago, the first delivery of CAP water was made in 1985 to the Harquahala Valley Irrigation District. But this was a huge milestone for Arizona, and it had been in the works for years. The authorizing legislation for CAP was signed back in the Colorado River Basin Project Act, but actually Arizona had been struggling to secure its use of the Colorado River water back to the early 1900s. The idea was planted around that time. The first surveys were done around 1922, around the time of the Colorado River Compact, and they started to scope out routes that could bring the Colorado River water over to central Arizona. Key to that was our Senator Carl Hayden. He was a champion of this idea for Arizona from those very early days. I don't know if you all knew this, but he was elected to the House of Representatives in 1912. And then later he was elected to the Senate in 1926, where he would continue to serve through 1968. That is quite a career. Even though he had led a filibuster of the Boulder Canyon Project Act, language in that that he had worked on for that act would eventually to support Arizona in the 1963 Supreme Court decree in Arizona versus California that would eventually confirm Arizona's right to its 2.8 million acre feet of Colorado River water. And that 1963 decree opened the door for the eventual passage of the Colorado River Basin Project Act, which is what authorized the CAP. So considering all of that, it only took us nearly half a century to overcome that first hurdle. And so it was actually pretty thrilling to see that the construction for CAP started in 1973, just 5 years after the authorization of the project. And then from there, it took 12 years to complete the construction to bring this first delivery of CAP water to Harquahala Valley. And then from there, 8 more years to complete the CAP through the Phoenix area, down through Pinal County, and down past south past Tucson. So overall, this was a great accomplishment for reclamation. It was so important for Arizona. So now we finally have the infrastructure in place to fully utilize Arizona's Colorado River water supply. But now let's jump to the present. We accomplished all of that, and now here we are operating under the first official year of DCP, where we have agreed to take reductions to that Colorado River water under certain conditions. So I wanted to do just a quick recap on what did we agree to under DCP, what did this mean for Arizona, and how are we implementing that? Now, don't worry, I'm not going to rehash the whole process because that was enough one time, I think. But I have always found it helpful to kind of step back and look at some of the steps in the process and how we came to be where we are. So first, this is just a diagram showing the different elevations in Lake Mead and the triggers and actions that will be required of Arizona and the reductions at those levels. So you all will, I'm sure, remember that under the 07 guidelines by themselves, there were 3 tiers of shortage that were identified. And those started at elevation 1075, where Arizona would have seen a 320,000 acre foot reduction. The second tier would have started at 1050 with a 400,000 acre foot reduction, and then tier 3 would hit at 1025, and that would have been 480,000 acre feet of reductions. But now DCP comes along and it added additional trigger elevations and new tiers to the process. So a new tier was added higher in the reservoir to begin those reductions sooner. So tier 0 came to be at elevation 1090. And at that elevation, Arizona would need to make a contribution to Lake Mead of 192,000 acre feet. And then as we move down through the different elevations, we would hit tier 1, and now it would have the compounded impact of taking the 07 guidelines reduction of the 320 together with the DCP contribution volume of 192 for a full reduction of 512 acre feet under tier 1. And then tier 2 went likewise to that. We would have to take the interim guidelines reduction of 400,000 plus the DCP 192, so that would be 592. And then between elevations 1050 and 1025, several different layers of action level triggers were introduced in there. The only one that impacts Arizona is the one at 1045, and we call that level tier 2B. And at that level, we would take the tier 2 reduction of 400,000, but the DCP contribution goes up to 240,000 at that point. The other elevations impact other states like California at those levels, but Arizona doesn't see any further changes in there. And of course, then when you still get down to 1025, we have to take the full reduction of the 720,000 acre feet. And again, the whole goal of DCP was not necessarily to keep us out of shortage, but to help prevent Lake Mead from getting to critical low elevations below that tier 3 trigger. So Arizona water users had been aware of the reductions called out in the 07 guidelines, and they'd been preparing for that possibility for over a decade. However, when the DCP contributions were introduced, one, they were much greater, 192,000 and 240,000 acre feet greater. And then also, they could be implemented within a very short amount of time, leaving very little time to plan for the implications of that. So in order to look at those implications, this is a diagram showing the full CAP water users and the priorities of water within the CAP system. And so when you look at this, you'll see that the highest priority is at the bottom, so priority 3. Then the next priority lower than that is the M&I priority and Indian priority, and that's a shared priority, so that's why they're shown next to each other. And then the next lowest priority is called the NIA, the non-Indian agricultural pool, and then a lower priority below that is the ag pool, and then the other excess pool, with the other excess pool being the water that is delivered to typically the Arizona Water Bank and the CHERD. And the reason why the focus is on CAP is that because of the water priority on the river, the reductions that will come about will largely fall on CAP and its water users. I would also like to say that keep in mind that the names that I went through on the priority pool, those are just names of the water. And the sectors that actually use that water actually kind of mixes and matches between them. So for instance, M&I users use the M&I priority pool, and they also use some Indian priority water, some priority 3 water, and some NIA priority water. And Indian water users use their Indian priority water as well as NIA priority. So this does not identify the sectors that are involved, but it's the priority of pool. But the reductions that would be coming would affect so many Arizonans. And so that's why we were talking about it in DCP. So if we were to have hit a tier 1 under the 07 guidelines, this is how that would have impacted CAP water users. It would have taken out the excess pool altogether, and it would have impacted the ag pool. Not fully, but quite a bit of it, maybe about 2/3 of it would have been wiped out with a 320,000 acre feet reduction under tier 1 of the guidelines. However, under tier 1, under the guidelines and DCP, it would have impacted us much deeper at 512,000 acre feet. So the excess pool would have been wiped out, the ag pool would have been all taken out, and it would have impacted the NIA priority pool. So why would Arizona have wanted to agree to such hits, and why would we work so hard to try to fit that into what was happening to us? There were several important reasons why DCP was a good compromise for Arizona to enter into. So first of all, DCP provided more certainty for the Colorado River system as a whole and for Lake Mead storage. And especially if you looked at the decreased hydrology that we had seen over the past 20 years leading up to this. And we are seeing no change to that trend so far. So it's good that we are looking at that might be our new normal. In addition to those reasons, all of the lower basin states, Reclamation, and Mexico had agreed to take additional reductions under these DCP agreements, so it wouldn't be just Arizona. However, though, to gain these benefits, Arizona, specifically CAP, would have to bear the greatest impacts. So as you saw in the previous diagram, the excess pool is the lowest CAP priority, so it would have been cut. And so it would have eliminated underground storage opportunities for the water bank. It eliminated water for the CHERD. And so that eliminates water for replenishing the aquifers in central Arizona. It would have reduced and eliminated CAP water for our agricultural customers in central Arizona. And it would have increased cost to the CAP customers. One thing that did happen, though, is that CAP did extend protections to the lower priority P5 on river water users. They are not numerous, they don't have a water use, and so we thought that that was something that we could accommodate and still try to let them have their water. So because of the potential DCP impacts to Arizona, the Arizona DCP process addressed if mitigation actions would be provided, who would receive that mitigation, and how would that be provided? What supplies would be available for that? So the DCPA steering committee concluded that there would be mitigation at 100% of the shorted volumes to the NIA pool for the early years, so 2020 through 2022, for the tiers 1, 2A, and 2B. Then there would be reduced mitigation levels in the later years, the 2023 through 2025, so you can see how those levels are reduced there, and that there would be no mitigation in 2026 for this pool, or if we were in a tier 3 shortage. And then, because the NIA pool is a higher priority, once mitigation was met for that pool, then mitigation could trickle to the ag pool. The ag pool mitigation was set at those specific volumes under the different tiers, and there was additional support for the development of the groundwater infrastructure program in those later years, providing up to 70,000 acre feet per year in 2023 through 2026. So what water supplies would be available to provide that, that mitigation? So part of the DCP process put some agreements in place. So the agreements that allowed the USF to GSF transfers, so the two blocks on top that you see there, the Phoenix AMA USF to GSF and the Tucson AMA GSF, were programs that would get wet water to the irrigation districts. In addition to that, wet water deliveries were pledged by CAP through the release of ICS credits that we had been working to create over the previous years. Also, like Pleasant Water and all the other operational supplies would be available also. In addition, CWCB also pledged up to $60 million for compensated mitigation. So this would be payment for reduced uses of CAP water. So getting payment instead of receiving your water. So one of those mitigation resources that was offered up was the CAWCD ICS credits. We have almost 400,000 acre feet stored in Lake Mead right now. Let me just step back for a minute. I'll talk about that ICS. That's the intentionally created surplus. And that was a concept that was developed under the 2007 guidelines. And it was developed to encourage conservation of water that would be stored in Lake Mead and then released at a later time under favorable conditions. And part of the DCP negotiations expanded that program to encourage additional conservation. And two of the really important components of that that made that additional conservation hopefully happen is that the cumulative amounts that each state could accrue was increased. And also the ICS credits could be released under a larger range of Lake Mead elevations. So again, the goal of that was to encourage more conservation to happen, more water to be left in Lake Mead in these times when the water supplies would be available. And so, so that program continues to expand, and you'll see how that plays into our current water system and setup and deliveries in future slides here. But by CWCD pledging the 400,000 acre-feet of credits, there was concern that by releasing these credits from Lake Mead, it would contribute to lowering the elevation and storage in Lake Mead. And so therefore, this idea of an offset component was developed as part of the Arizona DCP process. And so additional contributors would need to be involved to find water supplies that would replace these ICS credits that would be taken out. And so they would need to be involved to help create this ICS component. And so that's a wrap up of the two main components of the DCP program in Arizona, the mitigation component and offset. So where does that leave us today? So what are our operations in 2020? So if you'll recall, the operations for 2020 is determined back in August of 2019 through the results of Reclamation's 24-month study that's performed in August. And so at that time, the projection of what Lake Mead elevation would be on January 1st, and that's the criteria for how they determined the operations, the elevation was projected to be 1089.4, so just inside the Tier 0 trigger. So yes, that's why we are operating in Tier 0 in 2020. Turns out that actually the January 1st elevation ended up being 1090.5, just over that trigger elevation. But how everything works is that we still are operating under a Tier 0 because that's what was called out. That's what everybody started moving operations towards. However, one change that came out of that, because the DCP agreements actually did address this potential situation. So DCP ICS, a certain type of ICS that could be created under those circumstances, they can now be treated as EC ICS, Extraordinary Conservation ICS. And what that does is it puts different requirements on how that ICS is used. And so it provided more flexibility on how that could be used by the ICS creator. And so that was a good thing. So then not only is the August 24-month study important operationally on the river, but the April 24-month study also could impact the operations. So under certain conditions, from Lake Powell might change throughout the year, or it might change in the decision times of the year, depending on what the elevations of Lake Powell and Lake Mead are. Again, that's because the 07 guidelines is a coordinated operations document for those two reservoirs. And so anyway, what the 24-month study said that came out in April was that for 2020, Lake Powell's release would be 8.23 million acre feet. And while we would love to have a higher release, like the 9 million acre foot release, or even we could dream of an equalization release higher than that, it could certainly be lower than 823. So I think we are happy to accept an 8.23 release. And then because the 24-month study looks ahead 24 months, we can see here through the graphical depiction here of what that study says. It shows that the projection for Lake Mead at the end of this year, at the end of December of 2020, it looks like we will be squarely within another Tier 0 condition for operating in 2021. So now let's tie this real-time operational information with the mitigation plans we had come up with. So if you'll remember, we had no mitigation under Tier 0. And so since we are fully under a Tier 0 for 2020, we do not have to provide mitigation in 2020. And because it's so likely that we will be in a Tier 0 in 2021, we are planning that there will be no mitigation in 2021. But obviously, we'll wait to hear for those official results when that comes out. The good news of all of this is that no mitigation was needed. And therefore, those mitigation resources have been saved, and we can save those for potentially using at a later time if we end up needing them. And in addition to that, the NIA pool is completely met this year, as well as the ag pool. So let's just see how CVP then is operating in 2020. So what this shows is the bar on the left-hand side shows the CVP deliveries coming directly off the river. And so what this is showing is that the estimates of what would have been available to CAP would have been 1.67 million acre feet. And of course, right off the top, we are not taking our DCP reductions of 192,000 acre feet. And in addition to that, we also have the CAP system losses of 75,000 acre feet. So obviously we can't deliver that either. However, we had planned to deliver some of Lake Pleasant water, 50,000 acre feet. So that will increase our supplies of what we can deliver. So that leaves us with about 1.453 million acre feet that we can deliver to our customers, which shifts us over to the right bar. And so of that 1.453, we are planning to deliver about 1.2 million acre feet to our long-term subcontracts and about 250,000 acre feet to the ag pool. There is going to be some ICS creation and system conservation that's going to be created by some of our long-term subcontractors. And so that amount is not going to be delivered, the 93,000 acre feet. So we are planning to deliver about 1.36 million acre feet to our customers in 2020. And then just to kind of look at that, just it's a little bit more detail and it's in a different form. So kind of this tabular form. This is how we're creating that. So the first section in the blue there shows how we're creating our 192,000 acre feet of contributions for DCP. Part of that is going to be the 57,000 acre feet that is planned with the Ag Forbearance 3 program. This is a program where we have partnered with 10 ag districts in central Arizona where they have agreed to reduce deliveries of their Colorado River water. And so that's partially how we'll be creating it. Also, the Metropolitan Domestic Water Improvement District pledged 3,500 acre feet of water that they are not going to be taking this year. And CAP excess water is going to be foreborn of about 131,000 acre feet. So that's what comprises our 192,000 acre feet of DCP contributions. We also anticipate that there will be a small volume of water saved to the river through the Pilot System Conservation Program and the Bullhead City Project of about 400 acre feet. And then you'll see in the section in orange that there is additional DCP-related contributions and storage, and you'll see that the offset component is being created and filled by the Gila River Indian Community ICS programs in 2020, and also some system conservation water that is being created by the Colorado River Indian tribes on the river. And so that's what's helping to create, remember, that second component of DCP, the offset part. In addition to that, there's a small amount of ICS that is being created by the Colorado River Indian tribes, and also the Mohave Valley Irrigation and Drainage on the river. And then lastly, but not leastly, there's 10,000 acre feet that is being created by a partnership between Reclamation and the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. And this is 10,000 acre feet that goes towards the federal contribution requirement of 100,000 acre feet that was agreed to in the DCP agreements. And so that is starting to be created. So that's where we are in 2020 and the operations. amongst the DCP world that we live in. Meanwhile, other than that, CAP continues to be involved in many different activities and programs. And so the programs that you see listed here, we participate in these to help us to understand this Colorado River ecosystem that we live in and work within, and to improve our resilience to change in our climate. And so you'll see that we have been involved in several different research programs to try and understand the sensitivity of the Colorado River Basin to different meteorological and hydrologic variables. We have developed a climate adaptation plan for CAP, and this plan looks at how we assess climate change and how that could affect CAP and its operations, and ways that we can improve our resiliency as an organization. And along those same lines, we also participate in what's called the Water Utility Climate Alliance, Quagga, to partner and collaborate with other water utilities across the country on climate change adaptation. Also, CAP remains active in many other aspects of Colorado River business. Through Minute 323, the binational discussions continue to move forward regarding desalination projects, augmentation opportunities, and conservation projects. And there's other augmentation and conservation projects currently being pursued. We're always looking for opportunities that we can study and further effective methods of augmentation and conservation. We're going to have to be doing that. We're excited to be kicking off a few pilot projects right now that are studies in water conservation methods, and they're so new and where they are in the project that I can't really go into detail on those right now, but we hope to come forward to you and talk about those in the future, because they're kind of exciting projects going on. So hopefully I can come to you and tell you about those a little bit later. And then we continue to be involved in different programs such as the environmental program, the MSCP, the Multi-Species Conservation Program. That's an environmental program that works towards the recovery of endangered species on the lower Colorado River. And I forgot to put it on the slide, but we're also very involved in the Colorado River Salinity Control Forum. So then a couple of other things, really big things that are going on right now. Reclam has kicked off their process to review the effectiveness of the 07 guidelines, and that's being referred to as the 7D review process. And we are definitely very involved in that process. We're participating and providing comments in that process, and we are working towards what's coming up, which is the reconsultation of the 07 guidelines. We are currently coordinating with ADWR in these efforts, and we plan to be continuing that coordination for the many years ahead of us on this project. And the Arizona Reconsultation Committee is set to be convened here very shortly. We're expecting to announce dates for those upcoming meetings that will be starting sometime this summer, and so the dates will be coming up very soon. And through that process, we anticipate that we'll be involved in scenario development, modeling of new Colorado River policy and operations, and evaluation of other proposed materials as that comes out. So, as you can see, CAP is continuing to be very busy, and we're doing interesting and important work. But I also thought that given the backdrop of what we're working within today, that it was important to share some of the steps that CAP has taken during these times to keep our workforce healthy and protected at work as much as possible, in order to continue to stay on task for CAP, which is to achieve our mission of delivering Colorado River water to central Arizona. And so we've taken several different steps to change how we do work. Our management has been very proactive in facilitating a work from home setting for those positions that can do that, like myself and many others. However, we also have a lot of workers who still need help working on the canal, doing work on our system itself. So we have implemented shifted work schedules. So that allows the man to still be out there working, but to limit the contact between people as much as possible. And so summer is usually a time that we have outages on the canal, and that's how we do our maintenance activities, and many of those are still planned. There's some that are being deferred for a time. However, there's still work that is continuing to happen and obviously needs to happen. And also even modified some of our office configurations to try to keep our most critical workers as protected as possible. So we are doing a lot to continue to maintain and provide the Colorado River water to central Arizona. And hopefully that gives you some confidence in that. And I just will leave you with some websites for our organization. There's so much great information on these. I hope you check them out. On the CAP website, you'll find access to our operational data. There's a lot of history about CAP and Colorado River water. There's even educational materials for your kids. And obviously you can join into our board meetings remotely, and you can download the agendas and any of the materials that are provided on that website. And then I would also like to point you to this kind of a new branch of our website, knowyourwaternews.com. And there they've put a lot of great media, stories and infographics on different aspects of CAP operations. And so like if there's current happenings like releases of new reports, there'll be a little story about that. There's a great video on there about that anniversary that I talked to you about on the very first slide. So there's a video to check out there, and there's some great infographics like such as the Salt River siphon and our power portfolio, things like that. So anyway, if there's things you want to know about CAP, I encourage you to check out our website. And with that, I will conclude, and if there's any questions, happy to try to answer.
Yep, we would like to open this up for questions now. Some that we've already gotten just had to do with what some of these abbreviations were.
Oh, sorry. I see that now. Okay, so DCP, I see you answered that. Is there one above that?
Yes, DCP, that one.
Yes, thank you for answering.
And then I.
Sorry, I was so busy talking, I didn't look at the chat.
And then feel free to put questions in this question box if you have any here. And then Shanna, do you know if there's a recording that's going to be available after this?
Yes, there will be. Everyone attending should get a follow-up email, and I believe that will be attached on there. I'll also put this on the AZ Water YouTube channel, and we'll put a link to it on the luncheon page at azwater.org.
Okay, great, thank you. And then Deanna, do you see the questions that are coming up here?
No, I don't.
Okay. So the first one here is, what % of CAP water loss is from evaporation versus physical loss?
I would say most of it is due to evaporation. The canal is fully lined, and so there's very little that would be lost through seepage. So that 75,000 acre feet of system loss is primarily evaporation.
Okay, great. And then the next question we have here is, how were the GRIC and the CRIT persuaded to take part in the DCP?
I don't know how they were necessarily persuaded, but they were involved in the discussions from the beginning. They recognized that first of all, they have very large Arizona water supplies, and they recognize that they could be part of the solution. So I guess, they had to look at their portfolio on how they were using the water. Some of the water, especially from CRIC, they would have participated in the mitigation component, getting compensated mitigation. And so they were willing to accept some money for them not to use their full supplies of water. And so, I think each of them had to look at how they were using the water on their own lands. But you know, they recognized that they needed to be part of the solution also, and that what an incredible vital role that they could play because of the large supplies that they actually have allocated to them. So luckily, we are very glad for their participation and their continued participation. We continue, as you saw in 2020, how they're creating system conservation and ICS credits, and that will continue for more years to come. So we are very glad for that.
Okay. And then we also had some replies then also on this question from Maria Brady. GRIC was given an exchange of financial contribution and the opportunity to use some of the groundwater, and that they expanded a pump station with federal money between their water supplies. Okay,
Yes,
and then, yep, and then the next question we have here is, what is the difference then between ICS and ICUA?
ICUA. I'm not sure what that's referring to.
Okay, we can get back to that one then.
Okay.
Is the next question here, is Arizona seeing a reduction in agricultural water use as agricultural is converted to development?
I don't know if we can, if I can say that the reduction of use is tied to that conversion. The ag pool is not using its full amount that it could be taking this year. So the ag pool right now, they could be taking 300,000 acre feet, and you saw in that diagram that we'll be delivering about 250,000 acre feet to them. So you know, part of it is that they're getting other water from other supplies, such as either groundwater or the USF to GSF type of thing. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know enough of their full portfolio to know if their full water use has actually been decreasing. But I know for their CAP pool, they are using a little bit less of that because they're able to use some different supplies of water, like the USF to GSF. And actually, that was a part of DCP that I didn't even go into. It's all of the legislative changes that had to happen in changing how water policy operates and allowing them to have a little bit more flexibility in the types of water that they could use. So I know that would be a really good study. I'm sure that we'll be looking at that type of thing over the years to come. Good question.
Okay, and then the next one here is, how does CAP measure water use? Does it include system loss?
So we measure the system loss for the CAP delivery system itself. So the difference between what we take off at the Colorado River versus what we have to be able to deliver to our customers. And then how we measure use from there is we just measure how much we deliver to our customers at our turnouts. And so from there, then that becomes then the customer's responsibility for how they take their water. So I guess it's just the connection between what we take off the river versus then comparing it to what we deliver to our customers at their turnouts. I don't know if that answered your question, but if I don't answer these fully, feel free to email me there and I can try to answer these better.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next one that we have here is reclaimed water a part of any of the solutions?
Reclaimed water is certainly a resource that is used in Arizona. And sometimes reclaimed water is part of the recharge equation. I don't think that it was part of any of the specific components that went into this, but it certainly, that doesn't mean that it's not used. It certainly is considered a resource that is counted and used for all of the water users in Arizona. So it's part of what makes up the portfolios, but it may not have been directly part of the DCP. Although I might, yeah, no, I don't. I'm gonna have to leave it at that. I don't know specifically.
Okay, thanks. And then here for this next question, oh, no problem. Given that this is Invasive Species Week, is the CAP delivery system having a problem with invasive species, particularly Quagga mussels? And I don't know if I said that right.
Yeah, I think you did. Yes, we are definitely keeping our eye on the Quagga mussels. It is in the Colorado River system, and we have a biologist that he is the main person that deals with that and works to keep that in check in the CAP system. So it's definitely something that we are aware of and working towards keeping out of our infrastructure. So very good awareness.
Okay, and then the next question is, you mentioned a siphon at your closing comments. Please explain where and what it is.
Okay, so now I'm going to venture into dangerous territory here, even more dangerous. So the Salt River siphon, it was actually, we did a whole event out there because we had an outage. So the siphon, what it does is it's over in the east part of the Phoenix Valley, and the CAP canal mostly runs above ground, and it's this open canal like what you see in the picture here. And however, when it comes to things, other things that kind of get in its way, such as the Salt River, what do we do? How do we get the canal across a river? And so how they did that is they built a siphon that drops underground, goes underneath the river. I want to say it's about 30 feet from the river level, and it goes along, it crosses the river, and then pops back out on the other side. So that's the siphon that I was talking about. And so occasionally we have to dewater the canal so that we can send workers in to go maintain that siphon. So 30 feet below ground, forget the diameter of it, but it is quite impressive. And so they have to go in and do maintenance on it to make sure that there's no cavitation that's ruining the inside of it, or replace coatings that are in there. And so that's what the siphon does, is it takes the CAP water and helps it to cross essentially the Salt River. Yeah, I would encourage you. There's a great infographic kind of thing that describes what the siphon is, and it's right there at the Salt River interconnect area. So kind of neat engineering feat.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what are your thoughts on the Colorado River not completing its natural journey to the Gulf? Are we using too much water, and are our working solutions truly sustainable?
Okay, wow, that's a hard question. You know, the Colorado River is a very hard-working river. It supplies water to over 40 million people, 7 states, 2 countries. It works very hard. And so not only the people, but yes, the environment that it flows in also. And so we are involved by being involved with the binational process, Minute 323. We are working to try to keep water flowing to the environmental areas down in Mexico. That's part of some of the conservation programs that we do down there, is to conserve water so that more water can be delivered down to the Cienega in Mexico. You know, I will say that we deliver our obligation to Mexico, the amount that was agreed upon in the treaty between the US and Mexico. And so after it crosses the border down in the Yuma area, it flows to Mexico, and they have quite a large water use down there also. And so they have a lot of ag in the area. And so, you know, all of us water users on the river have responsibility to the river and the environment that it flows within. And so that's why we are working together on so many of these aspects. Mexico has been at the table with us through the DCP process. They agreed to take reductions also, so they are fully recognizing that this system could be further impacted. So they are definitely at the table and working with us on that. Like I said, you know, by participating in these things, we helped to make a pulse flow happen. This was several years ago. I can't remember when it was, 15, maybe 2015, 2016. I could have that date wrong, but we did a pulse flow that let water flow all the way through the Latrobe River system that made it down to the Gulf. And there was a lot of great environmental studies that was done from that. And we try to work on projects that helps to make more water available for that. You know, but we need to all work together to make sure that we are being as responsible in how we use the water. So we hope that we are definitely trying to be part of that. So is that good? Is that all of the questions?
I think that is. This is Shayna. I just jumped back in. I think we're good on questions. Jackie, did you have any more?
Sorry, I'm on mute.
Okay.
We do have a lot more questions, but I'm thinking we can just do 2 more and then we'll go on to announcements. Okay, so for the next one that we have here is, okay, let me see. Has CAP ever considered a longer time period for their yearly projection studies, for instance, to allow for larger variability that could affect mitigation plans? Would this be feasible or useful, or feasible/useful?
Okay, can you read that again? It was really long. I'm trying to just grasp. Okay.
Yep. Has CAP ever considered a longer time period for their yearly projection studies, for instance, to allow for larger variability that could affect mitigation plans?
Okay. So we have a lot of workshops where we try to work with our customers in talking about issues such as this. I'm sure looking ahead as far as planning for water, planning for what the water rates are, that is huge for our customers. And I'm sure that any kind of information that we can share with you all, I know how important that must be. And so we do try to have regular workshops with our customers that discuss those things, the rates, the operations coming up. I know we have one coming up, I want to say probably in August, where we look at projections for how our operations are going to go. And certainly, you know, we are open, obviously the board meetings are open to the public, but also those workshops, just keep an eye on our website for when those are announced. And we certainly do welcome public input and how our discussions can help you. And I know these are very different times that we have coming up for us for so many reasons, DCP and COVID stuff. So you know, please come to those meetings and, you know, share with us how we can work with you all better.
Okay, thanks. And then another question we have here is about how much water that we take off the river ends up getting returned to the river?
For CAP itself, none of the water that we take off returns to the river, just because of how how we're situated, where we're physically located. There's a lot of water users actually on the Colorado River that their return flows do go back to the river, and those are accounted for in Reclamation's water accounting reports. Those are all documented in there, and so, but for CAP itself, just because of where we're physically located, all of the water that we take off the river stays within central Arizona and not back to the river.
Okay. And then we'll just leave this for possibly the last question here. Is there a requirement to discharge water from Lake Powell to stimulate natural floods in the Grand Canyon, and does that affect levels in Lake Mead?
So the releases from Lake Powell, yes, they do flow down and they do affect the levels in Lake Mead. And there is a whole environmental process that is involved in the operation of Lake Powell and how that impacts the section of the Grand Canyon between Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And so it's looking at the endangered species that live within that stretch. It looks at the environment, the sand load, the sediment load, and that's all part of the Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Program. You can look that up there. It's definitely a big component of Colorado River management, and so they come up with studies, recommendations of flows. They do high flow releases to help with some of the sediment transport, that type of thing. But those studies, they operate and they identify some of these releases, and then those releases are worked into those overall numbers of how that water is supposed to be delivered from Powell to Mead. So trying to accomplish both of the goals of meeting the delivery requirements, so that 8.23 million acre foot release that I talked about for us for 2020, within that 823 that is within the operational requirements, they also work within that to meet the environmental requirements. So I encourage you to check out that Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Program for more information on those things.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you so much for giving us this presentation, and thank you for all the participants for joining us. For those of you whose questions did not get answered, we'll make sure to send these off to Deanna so then she can get you some answers for these. And then if there's anyone else that has any announcements, please feel free to let me know here. Other than that, I think that's it. And then we will have another technical lunch, I think possibly in June from our Tucson group.
Yep.
But we will keep you updated.
Yep. Thank you guys all for attending. Keep an eye on azwater.org and also our social media platforms for more updates, and let us know if there's any specific topics or anything that you would like to see, or if anyone would like to present. We have ways to get you either through a luncheon or through a committee. We'd love more content from our members, so please just let us know how we can support you all. Thank you and have a nice day.
Great. Thanks for setting this up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deanna. That was wonderful.
Okay, thanks. We'll be talking.